we ready if I start admitting folks?
Yeah.
I'll start off automatically.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, you should be able to just click start video, and I think it will.
Oh, right, sorry.
There you go.
If we could record it for Chris, that would be.
Yeah, Jeff's got it recording.
Jeff, you're just on top.
I am crushing it today.
Yeah.
You were ready for your photo shoot.
I'm almost ready. I brought my curling iron.
Shave. This week got away from me though.
I know, even this morning I was like, oh my gosh, crazy.
This month's got away from me. Just taking the season off.
Okay, we can regroup in spring.
Yes.
Hey everyone, we're just getting assembled here on our end.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Sarah's here, right?
Yes, she just ran to the bathroom.
Okay.
Did Allie post that landfill stuff on the Facebook page?
Greg did this morning because she didn't have access to it.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
And put it on our website and pushed it out via email.
Thank you.
Okay. We're just waiting for one more commissioner, Commissioner Mudge, and Colleen Canada, our owner's rep, was going to join to.
Does she have the link? Is that what she has to send an email?
Was that an email? She was
Okay.
right?
Yeah. She has to leave at 9:30.
Yeah.
Okay. More people in the waiting room.
Oh. Of course. Where's Colleen? Oh, she's in the room.
There we go.
Okay.
What?
I finally sent the proposal to.
Just waiting for the last couple folks to join the Zoom.
Okay. Oh, just waiting for Colleen. Okay. Is that?
Or we could probably.
Oh, that's not her phone.
Colleen's here.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay. Thanks, Colleen. So we'll go ahead and get started this morning. It's 9 a.m. on September 16th, and we're just here for a work session to discuss financing options for the Lake County Community Justice Center. So, Jeff, I will let you take it, or Katie.
I can maybe start. Maybe we could just do quick introductions. We can start
Sure.
here in the room. So, Commissioner Jeff Fiedler. I've been like the commissioner, kind of more on point on the on the Justice Center project.
Sure. Kayla Marcella, Lake County Commissioner.
Good morning, everyone. Sarah Mudge, Lake County Commissioner.
Morning, Tim Bergman, County Manager.
Okay, that's it for us in the room. Yeah, maybe, I don't know who, actually, maybe, Katie, do you want to introduce yourself? We can keep going on our side. Katie Welter.
Sure. Hi, my name's Katie Welter. I'm an attorney based in Buena Vista and represent Lake County, helping to facilitate this project, and have been involved in particular in some of the funding and financing aspects.
Okay. And Colleen.
Hi, I'm Colleen Nada with Dynamic Program Management. We're the owner's rep for the project on the construction side.
Okay, I'll turn it over to maybe the Kutak Rock folks.
Sure. My name's Tom Pelt. I'm a partner at the law firm of Kutak Rock. We've specialized, one of our specialties is public finance. I've been doing it for about 35 years or so. And also on the phone is our senior associate, Ashley Dennis. I'll let Ashley introduce herself. And then in addition, other attorneys through this process will have tax specialty attorneys working on as part of the QTAC team, as well as a few paralegals that have their own specific roles as we proceed.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashley, and as Tom said, I'm his associate. I've been doing this a little less than he has, but definitely excited to work with everyone.
Let's see, Alan, can you go?
Sure. Alan Matlas with Stiefel Nicholas. So we would act as underwriter with an investment bank that would help the county finance the project. I'm a couple of years short of Tom. This is my 31st year in this business, and I do a lot of work around the state, but a lot of county work. And Stacy Mast is on as well. I'll let her introduce herself.
Morning, everyone. Stacy Mast, work with Alan in our Denver office and help support him with all of the local government clients and working on a variety of transactions around the state with him as well, and some other judicial centers that we could talk about if you have interest in that.
Okay. Well, so I have to admit, I didn't think about really an agenda. I don't know if it's like our meeting or your meeting. But tell us what we need to tell you.
Yeah. So let me, if I can start, I sent over a kind of some ideas to Tim just to start the discussion. But what I thought might be helpful for everyone is for the county to start with kind of where they are in the process, what's been accomplished. And the last time I think we had a conversation, at least I was on with the whole group, was a few months ago, kind of where you are, and then what would be the goal of the county, the perfect solution, and we'll see if we can figure out a way to get close to that.
Okay. Yeah. So we have been working, with the design team. So we have the architect and general contractor under contract. They've been working with all the occupants of the building, to get to a design, and we got to the point with in schematic design where we did our first pricing estimate. I'll say our initial goal for budget had been a total project budget of 45 million, and hard construction costs within that of about 33 million. Our sort of intent, not having had this discussion yet, but on that 45 million budget, our intent had been to finance around 35 million of that and bring 10 million to the table with either grant funding or money from the county, upfront money from other building participants. And I can talk more about that in a second. Well, actually, so for the building right now, or at the point when we got that pricing estimate, and the design work that we've done, that includes a jail, so because our current jail is shut down. It includes office space for both city police and the county sheriff's office. It includes space for dispatch, which is run out of the county sheriff's office. And then, so that's sort of the law enforcement detention side. On the courts side, it includes 2 courtrooms. We currently have 1 courtroom that was built in 1955. We built 2 courtrooms and the associated, clerks and, judges' chambers, office space around that, jury deliberation rooms, et cetera. And then, some public space up front, just entryway, security, front navigator, concierge desk, and then some public space for people to sit and maybe, have access to some private confidential meeting rooms of different sizes. And then on the second floor above the courts was space for district attorney and probation offices. That was about 50,000 square feet altogether for everything I described. So maybe like the initial pricing came in horrific. We're basically 15 million over budget. So we had some discussions this week or over the last 10 days, and our current approach is to, of that 15 million overage, cut space in the building to reduce about half of that. So, reduce on the order of 6-7 million by eliminating that second floor of the district attorney and probation. I think that's about 5,000 or 6,000 square feet. Also reduce the jail size a bit, and then other, and other value engineering options, making everything less fancy and poking and prodding at other space. But anyway, that 15 million overage, reduce, cover half of that by reducing the scope of the building and add about half of that to the total project budget. So I think we're more looking at sort of 52 million for a total project cost. Colleen, I don't know if you want to add anything or correct anything I said in terms of like that question of kind of where we are in the process, maybe say like sort of where we think we are on timeline. I mean, we're still looking to go into permitting and break ground in the spring, but Colleen, I'll let you add some stuff.
Yeah, we've had, of course, since the pricing came back, we've had a lot of meetings with the design team and the contractor on some ideas on how to move the price point down. Jeff covered all the big things. Right now, we're currently waiting on the design team to reconfigure the program with the square footage of the various items that are going to be cut. Then our contractor will reprice the revised square footage. We'll have a little bit better idea, but right now, with all the cuts that we've made, we're still looking at 6 to 8 million probably over that budget, and that includes appropriate owner contingency, appropriate escalation to get us to a start next year. We were hoping to break ground in March or April of 23. We're currently on like a 2 to 3 week design delay before we can move forward into design development. So we might not be able to break ground until May of 2023. So that's kind of overall timeline. We expect the construction will take somewhere between 16 and 18 months, and we were looking for a Thanksgiving-ish opening of the building in 2024.
Great.
And then maybe, sorry, I think I forgot just one or two other things just on the financing. So we, in terms of sort of like funds that we know are available, we secured a congressional earmark of about 3.6 million towards the construction of the building. The city, because the city police is in there, the city has committed 5 million towards the project budget for their office space. We're still working with them on how much of that is upfront, in the financing terms, but the agreement we have with them is that however that 5 million is structured, it would match the payment duration and interest rate and terms of our underlying COP. And then we don't have it secured, but we have been encouraged by the state courts to apply for the underfunded courts grants in their grant cycles, and we have been led to believe that could easily be in the 1 to 2 million range, if not more.
I won't interrupt too much, but just a couple of quick questions. Is it contemplated that you'll have a guaranteed maximum price contract at the point of funding?
Colleen,
yeah, so we actually just started talking about the potential of going to a GMP at the 100% DD estimate. We're still weighing project or cost risks of that. So the original plan was to have the GMP at construction documents, which would be around the end of this year, probably now pushing into January is my guess that we would have a full GMP. We might do an early release package as well to get some of those first subcontractors under contract and reduce the risk of escalation on those first front end contractors, as well as start ordering items that have long lead times. Mechanical equipment currently is really hard to get, especially generators. So things like that we would want to put under contract possibly before the final GMP. So we might have an initial GMP and then go to GMP. But yes, this is a CMGC process.
And while we're talking about that, Alan, how critical is that at the point of pricing or closing?
Yeah, so this is, this is the problem we have with every transaction, right? You have to pick a cost at some point in time. We have to pick a number, but obviously the project hasn't been built yet. I think the fact that you've done all of this work up front, the fact that you have the design team, the contractor, you've gone through design, I mean, you're working through the process. I think that will help in the financing. So the question that investors looking to purchase the certificates will ask is, what if there's an overrun on the cost, and what do we do about it? I mean, you've built 75% of the building, and then all of a sudden you find out that you need an extra X dollars, what happens at that point? I think the fact that as Colleen mentioned, there'll be contingencies and, there's a big team looking at it. I think we can get over that. I'm not that worried about it. I've run into this in other projects, and we've been able to find solutions by, waiting on a couple things at the end, maybe not totally finishing a room that's the third jury deliberation room, or not, that kind of thing. But that's the risk. But we're never going to get rid of that risk, unfortunately, until the project's built. So.
I know we have a bundle of funding here that's coming from various grant sources, and then we talked about it from the city of Leadville as well. Would the city be expected to sort of show their funding in escrow, so to speak, that the cash is actually there by closing? Is that what's contemplated, or just that they have the financial wherewithal to borrow money as it's needed to pay for their portion?
Is that a question for us or for Alan?
No, well, I think we're just wondering, because that adds another element. Then the cities, if they don't have the cash at closing, then it becomes that becomes yet another sort of factor, I suppose, in that risk of completion of construction.
Yeah, but I think, Tom, what Commissioner Fielder was saying is that they may pay some cash, or may enter into a lease for space.
Yeah, and our expectation sort of on our to-do list is we would expect to have an executed IGA with the city that specifies like exactly what they're getting, in terms of square footage and, what they're paying for. And then on our, on their side, it would have a clear, basically like payment schedule, so
So the funding is baked into the county's funding, basically. It's just a source of payment of a part of they sublease, so to speak, for that period.
Yeah, they understand they are not part owners, this is like, they're entering into a lease agreement.
Well, but didn't we, so the 5 million is separate from a future like lease agreement, right? So didn't we ask for like 1 point something upfront from the city and then a agreement to pay the rest of that balance up to the 5 million? And on top of that, we will do a lease to rent their operational space?
Yeah,
Is that correct?
I think the lease, well, I don't know if I'm using the right words. What the city council voted on was to pay their share of that 5 million and, annual, their share of annual operating costs of the building.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think I may have and if I haven't, I can dig up this document, but previously shared that I financed the project in Moffett County. Gosh, I'm now being my age, more than 25 years ago. And we had several entities, and that was a similar structure. So we had a lease from the city of Craig, we had a lease from the state patrol, that were taking space. So I think that's a great way to share the cost and to help the county get this project over the finish line.
We did take a look at the Moffett documents, Alan, and that was part of how we started negotiating a framework with the city.
So I was actually helpful. Thank
Very.
you. I appreciate it.
No, I mean, and specifically like the key terms in that Moffett document were what we sort of negotiated. We called it like a term sheet that we presented to city council, sort of what we would promise and what they would promise, and that's what they voted on.
That's great.
Go
ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm just going to say as it relates to cost then too. I mean, in March, there was the 10.5 acre site, if I remember right, that was acquired. Is that still the site for the project? Okay.
Yep.
Are there any uncertainties as far as environmental that are yet to be known on that site?
I mean, yes, because we haven't actually like run bulldozers in there yet.
Right.
But we did, I would say very extensive due diligence before purchasing that site. And there's reams of documents because it's part of, it's been in the Superfund area, on the environmental contamination and what sort of has or hasn't been discovered and what has or hasn't been moved. And we did our own sampling before purchase. And then maybe I'll turn it to Colleen about like where we are on sort of the geotech and, investigating that further. There's also, there's vertical and horizontal mine shafts on the site that we were aware of. We've been further investigating. But Colleen, where do we stand on that?
We actually got a draft report yesterday evening from the geotech on the geophysical and the geotechnical information. I have not read it yet, but my conversations with the geotech engineer seemed to indicate that there wasn't a huge concern regarding the mine shaft, the lateral mine shafts impacting the design of the foundation by the structural engineer. I will verify that in the reports that we got yesterday. As far as environmental, as Commissioner Fiedler said, there's been extensive due diligence done with environmental consultant, environmental attorney on what is there, what types of processes need to take place by the contractor's earthworking contractor. The county has a repository available to export contaminated soils. This is something that we had to do also with the recently constructed Lake County Elementary School project. So, and it is the same contractor actually that built the Lake County Elementary School. So they are familiar with those protocols. The environmental consultant will be assisting in providing all of that information. They'll be doing some on-site trainings, I think, with the contractor on how to handle those materials. So that is pretty typical for work up in Leadville. I would say certainly a consideration being in the Superfund site and something the team has some limited experience on. I'm not saying we're experts, but the contractor has worked on a site similar to this. Katie Welter has a lot of background probably too, because she was the person in the force who got a lot of that due diligence done before we were brought on board. So I don't know if Katie has any additional comments there.
Yeah, I would just say in terms of reassuring investors, the county obtained all of its bona fide prospective purchaser protections. That's the sort of the environmental term for we learned everything you could possibly learn. And so that greatly limits liability with respect to future harms associated with the property. The county has just a fabulous environmental counsel team in Gable House Granberg. Melanie Granberg is the lead attorney. She's been with the county now for I think over 15 years and just knows this county inside and out. And she is happy to work with you all in any way that you might need to, advise on concerns with that.
Perfect. Now, would there be, is there the possibility, given that it's a 10-acre site, and I don't know what the footprint of this facility is expected to be, would there be other future activity on that site that's contemplated during the term of the financing, whether we go whatever 20-25 years?
Potentially, right?
Yep. I mean, there, especially since we're needing to knock some significant space out of this building, we'll be anticipating some future expansion. I mean, we're already anticipating some future expansion space, like more jail space, a third, smaller courtroom, but now we'll include on the site plan potential district attorney and probation office space. I think beyond that, there's no concrete plans. We've been talking about since some of the more than half the site sort of gets steeper and more contaminated. We're talking about doing ground-mounted, non-penetrating solar potentially, but I think building stuff with big dug foundations is going to be hard on the remainder of that site, and we don't have any specific plans to put something there.
But it sounds like there could be some phasing due to cost-saving measures taken in the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
And the only reason that and we'll kind of think that through with the county. The idea is going to be that, the property itself will be encumbered, so there will be limitations or flexibility, if you will, depending on how we can build it in on future income, future encumbrances or activity on the site, to the extent that you need to finance something. For pay-as-you-go type activities, it doesn't present any issues. But if you needed the ability to, in effect, do another lease transaction in 10 years or 5 years or whatever it might be, we need to be able to provide you a path to be able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it just maybe just sort of ballpark. I mean, the future DA probation space would be 1/10 the size of this building. So nothing as significant, nothing remotely as significant as this building is contemplated on the site.
Right, because if we don't, I guess that, the other alternative that some counties or local governments would do would to use another facility as collateral on a substituted asset lease transaction, but if you don't have a lot of assets that are free and clear and unencumbered, that opportunity doesn't present itself to you. That's why we need to, to kind of understand your situation and be able to enable you to do what you need to do in the foreseeable future. So that's the only reason that I raise it. It's not something that we need to resolve now, just to try and understand the issue.
Yeah.
Hey, Thomas, would land count as an asset?
Land counts as an asset, but it's harder to lease. I know, Alan, have you done any kind of?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer, Tim, is is if you had to do a future project and for some reason we couldn't use this site of the Community Justice Center, my first place to go to would be the existing courthouse, right? And then do what I refer to as, a very fancy home equity loan. You just borrow against the value. But land is trickier because it's harder to it's hard to give a number to it, essentiality is one of the things that is important in lease purchase financings and certificate of participation financings, bless you. And so we like to say this is really important. So a building to the county is really important, but land may or may not, it depends.
I mean, maybe we can figure out if Alan, if there isn't insurance, and it doesn't, it based on the circumstances, probably wouldn't be in this case. I mean, maybe we can just devise a way to say, as long as there's expansion for related uses, that those are permissible encumbrances.
Yep.
Even though you might have some dilution of the county's credit, and maybe you cap the dollar amounts associated with it or something if need be, but you basically come right out and anticipate, phased future capital financings that can also be encumbered on a parity basis in effect.
Right. So one of the things that I think I always try to focus on when I'm working on a financing is to think about the next financing. Just even if it's not going to happen tomorrow or 10 years, it doesn't matter. Just to make sure we haven't, painted ourselves into a financial corner and then we don't have a lot of choices left. So that's what Tom's talking about. I think it's easy, Tom, to include that kind of provision. I don't think that's going to affect the financing. It's, hey, they're building this building. They may expand the building for DA, for probation, for courts, bless you. And we may, that may happen in the future. That's okay. I think that's okay. So
sorry, just one maybe basic question for me. Can you explain what encumbered means? Because I'm thinking of it like in budget terms. But what is that process?
it means mortgaged, essentially, leased, essentially. Yeah.
Would it be, so should we, do we want to do a full assessment and appraisal of all county lands to give to these guys to come up with
Well,
alternatives? Because I'm thinking like, yeah, we could do this building, or we could try the annex and the gym first or something, or I don't know. Maybe that's getting
so let's talk about that a little bit, because that was on our list as the leased property. So the way I will describe the financing, and then Tom and Ashley can correct my description of the financing. But so basically, you have the county. The anticipation is the county owns the land. The county would lease the land to a bank trustee. We would sell certificates. Those certificates provide the funding to build the building. And then the county leases the building back, right? The constructed asset. Okay. We try to match the value of the building to the amount you're borrowing. So we don't want to make it too much more. We don't want to make it too much less. My assumption has been that the county does not own other assets worth $40 or $50 million that they could lease, that we're going to use the new building as the leased property, not other buildings that the county owns, but we should investigate that to see. So the difference is we use the new building. That's like a construction loan, right? You're secured by the cash, and then you're secured by construction in progress, and then you're secured by the building. If you had existing buildings, then it's like a home equity loan. You're borrowing against value you already have. So those are the two approaches.
Can I ask you a quick question on that? If we were to investigate securing it against other buildings, it would become extremely tricky to like sell or get rid of those buildings, right?
That's true. One thing we have done is we can substitute. So you could use the existing buildings to start and then substitute the constructed community justice center when built. So here's, well, let me say this, and Tom and Ashley and Stacy can correct me if they don't agree. It is better to use existing buildings, if possible, as the leased property than to use the to be constructed building. Because if you use the to be constructed building, as you might figure out from my definition, it's to be constructed. So we don't have an asset yet. So there's construction risk. There are other, it makes more complicated. In addition, if you have existing buildings, the transaction could qualify for bond insurance. And we can talk about that in a minute, but it's just a way to, it's a way to further enhance the credit of the county and get lower interest rates on the financing. There are two insurers, neither of which are very like to insure new construction. They like to have existing buildings, but so that will help a little bit with the financing cost using existing buildings if that's possible.
So when you, I guess back to the land, because we're thinking about, I mean, we have a golf course, we have an airport, we have a ski area. But are you thinking, so like it needs to be like, yeah, well, like, does it need to be like an actual building, or like with those facilities?
I mean, there are buildings
Count.
on those facilities.
Right. Anyway,
They
sorry.
are profitable businesses.
So one of the best example I can think of is another project that this same Hutech Rock Stiefel group worked on in Canyon City. Is we did a financing for the fire district. We used two existing fire, I don't remember what buildings we used as existing. They were not valued as much as the financing, but what we did is we threw in existing buildings and the new construction as the leased property. And then when the building was built, we took out the old buildings. So what I think Stiefel could do is talk to the bond insurers, explain the plan, and see if they can get comfortable. And so this concept, I know we say this to everybody I talk to, insurance is kind of a weird term in this, for this description. What basically happens is you pay a one-time fee to get the insurance. The bond insurer basically says, we will make any payments if the county does not make a payment over the next 30 years. We'll step up and make the payments. That gives comfort to investors. Investors are willing to accept a lower interest rate with that extra security. We evaluate the difference between the cost of the one-time insurance policy and the savings and interest, but I will tell you, it's going to save a bunch of money. So I think we can investigate that and say, there's a collection of assets that the county has. Here is what they are. If you had a list with at least a value that's on for, I don't know, insurance purposes or something, we can just say, here's the list. Would this be a thing where we could include them and then add? That's something to think about, because it does help with the financing. And as costs go up, if there's any way we can help reduce the financing costs, that'd be great. Does that make sense to everybody? So I want to make sure I'm.
Yeah, no, I'm actually feeling better.
Yeah. So I'm sure there will be lots of information that you need from us over the but like starting to pull together that list and some, whatever best estimate we can get whether it's the insured value or a commercial assessment we've done,
Right.
et cetera.
And we don't need, just Commissioner, we don't need like a real appraisal type of thing. If sometimes they will ask for like an estimate, you can ask the contractor and say, hey, we own this building, it's 12,000 square feet. If we have to rebuild it today, how much would it cost? They'll just give you a number, right? That's good enough. We don't need like a real appraisal of these properties.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them are very difficult to appraise, and then they become really complicated, and it doesn't help that much. I'm going to ask Tom and Ashley to talk about the 117,000 documents they're going to ask for the county to provide. And part of that process in the due diligence is to gather the information so we can so they can prepare both the financing documents as well as the offering document, the sales document that we use for disclosure and for selling the certificates. So let me hand it over to Tom and Ashley.
Sure, maybe I'll let Ashley talk for just a little bit about that.
Certainly. And I apologize, my dog is barking at my feet. So if you hear him, he has no respect for Zoom calls. I'm so sorry. So Alan kind of gave you a general overview of how the transaction works at a 30,000 foot level. We can dig deeper into the documents. The first document that, of course, we're going to want to present before the commissioners is the authorizing resolution. So we're going to put together an authorizing resolution. That is going to be a parameters resolution. So we're going to give you ceilings on the principal amount, the net effective interest rate, the term of the lease. So that as long as our final pricing information fits within those parameters, you're authorized to close this transaction. With the authorizing resolution, I'm so sorry, we're also going to present the forms of the leasing documents. So the first one is going to be the site lease. That site lease is what conveys the leasehold interest from the county's assets to the trustee. So the trustee has a leasehold interest in the properties and then can turn around and lease them back to the county pursuant to a lease purchase agreement. The lease purchase agreement is essentially the contract that says we're gonna lease the property back. The county never loses its fee interest because at best the trustee has a leasehold interest, which we like that structure because there's less risk to the county there. And then the payments that the county makes under the lease purchase agreement equal the debt service payments for the COPs. So simultaneously with the site lease and the lease, the trustee is going to enter into an indenture of trust, and pursuant to that indenture of trust, we'll have these certificates issued. The certificates themselves will fit within the parameters of the authorizing resolution. And then essentially when the county makes its lease payments, the trustee is going to turn around and take those payments and pay the debt service on the COPs. Is that making, are there any questions so far? Okay, great. So then the other primary document that we have is going to be a certificate purchase agreement. So this is going to be the document that the county is going to enter into with your Stiefel team. And it's essentially the trustee will sign it as well. But this is essentially the document by which you have an agreement to purchase. So Stiefel is going to agree to purchase these COPs and act as your underwriter. And that document provides the terms for that interaction. The certificate purchase agreement is signed on the date of pricing. So Stiefel is going to go do their thing. They're going to work really hard, get these awesome results for you. And then the designated person under the authorizing resolution will need to sign that document just to lock in all the final pricing information. The balance of the documents, and there will be closing certificates, there's going to be tax documents, and we can have a whole different conversation about tax due diligence. We will with you when we get closer to closing. But essentially all of the rest of the documents will be executed prior to closing. We handle the logistics and the mechanisms of that. We'll put together a signature package for you, send it in time for a BOCC meeting so that we can make sure that everyone is gathered at once. The bulk of the signatures are probably going to be for our chair and our county clerk, but there'll probably be a couple of ancillary signatures from other officials of the county. I think that is, so those are the primary operating documents. The other document that's really, really important and very time consuming is the operating document for these transactions. That's called an official statement. There are two versions of those there are two versions of that document, the preliminary official statement and the final official statement. The preliminary just means that that it is the version of that document before we have final pricing information. That document provides all the information that we need to present to investors with respect to the county, the transaction itself, and then other credit considerations. But it has certain blanks in it because we don't know what the final principal amount is going to be until we price. We don't know what your interest rates are going to be until we price. So there are certain items that are called permitted omissions that are left out in the preliminary official statement. We then go back in after pricing, we fill in those holes, and then we post the final official statement. That document is rather time consuming. It's a disclosure document, so we really drill in on certain things. We make sure that the county is disclosing what needs to be disclosed. The discussion that we were having earlier about environmental considerations, we want to make sure that that information is all laid out there. The goal is to essentially say that we've given investors everything that they need in order to make an informed investment decision. So that's going to take some time, and we'll be there working through it with you. Stifel will also weigh in on what they think needs to be disclosed. And yeah, once that piece is wrapped up and pricing's wrapped up, then we'll take it from there and run you to closing. But those are essentially the larger documents. The last one that I want to mention, the county will need to enter into what's called a continuing disclosure undertaking. The form of that document will be attached to the official statement. Essentially, the SEC is going to require Stifel to require the county to make promises to do annual updates to financial and operating information. So certain of the information that's available to investors in the official statement, you're going to need to make available to them, update for them on an annual basis. The other component to the continuing disclosure undertaking is that there are certain events that if they happen, the county does need to disclose it to the market. So that's going to be things like rating changes, any payment delinquencies, the incurrence of a material financial obligation. If those things happen, then the county does need to provide notice. And we can drill into the mechanics of that. We can talk about how to access Emma, which is where you're going to post everything. We at QTech Rock are happy to serve as a resource to you post-closing to kind of walk you through how to do that if you're unfamiliar with using Emma. Which it's not the best user-friendly website, but once you do it a few times, it kind of, becomes routine. So those I would say are the major components with respect to documents. There are other closing certificates, other minor things that we're going to have you sign, but that's the big picture. Tom, did you want to add it?
Yeah, no, I'll just do a kind of a plain English bird's eye view because there is a lot of stuff and that's a lot of Greek in there. So on a kind of a chronological basis, the next big step is going to be a questionnaire that goes to the county that asks for, just material documents, administrative type stuff, material, operational kind of things, and basically paints a picture of where your revenues come from and some of the data associated with that. What are your, what's your tax base look like, all of those kinds of things. And so that takes the lion's share of getting to the point where, Stacy and Alan are very involved in this process too, but there's conference calls, there's tweaking information. I mean, it's somewhat of a time consuming process, but that's what's referred to as the official statement. There's a preliminary one, and then is actually indicated after the market and sale of the certificates, there's a final one that goes out. Now that goes to investors. Obviously, we try and paint a picture of what a reasonable investor would want to know. It also can be used for the rating on the bonds, and it will be used for a bond, or I should say a certificate rating. So it's relevant from that perspective. And then finally, bond insurance, if that's a possibility, which would save the county a little bit of money if we can get insurers interested based on the county's creditworthiness. Now that's a document, and there was something Ashley mentioned referred to as EMMA, or Electric Municipal Market Access. It's kind of like EDGAR for securities, but that official statement or prospectus, if you will, if you were dealing with securities, like an equity security, that gets posted up on a web page, and it's a document that's out there effectively forever. It's for anybody to see, you know, and so we want to really put the most accurate and best picture on the county as we can. I don't know when the last time a county did the county had done a financing, but I think it's if I last looked, it's I think been a while. And so again, this kind of becomes a public document that has all these other purposes that's basically out there. So that's why everybody in the county is going to be kind of involved in that process from, the staff's, Tim's perspective, staff on down, as well as the commissioners. So then the other documents that Ashley talked about, you've got, the structural documents, basically the site lease where the county's leasing that 10.5 acres, the lease purchase agreement, there's a purchase agreement that the interest rate for the county won't be locked in until those certificates are marketed, and that's some months out at this point, but there's a lot of documentation and involvement. And we will have, as many or, hopefully as few calls associated with this as you want in the working group. That can involve, and I think Stacy's probably putting that together, may have put it together already, but, we'll want to know, who do you want on the working group from the county's perspective that sees all the drafts? It might be that the board, doesn't necessarily want to see drafts until you get close to more substantially final preliminary official statement. It's really whatever approach you want to take in that regard. But that's kind of the big picture. So there's a lot of data gathering on the front end, drafts of documents that go out, but and then there's basically this flurry of activity towards the end. Once the pricing occurs and you've locked the interest rate, you're talking about delivery of funds within about a 2-week period.
So one thing we can talk about, and we send it over to Tim, and just like a summary is, kind of who the players are, the timing on a financing, like how long it takes to do all this stuff. And, there's probably a speed we can't exceed, but there is we try to match the timing that the county wants. So I know you talked about construction in spring, but then Colleen talked about ordering some stuff early. If the county had a preference, when would they want money, like in hand to spend?
Other than tomorrow?
Well, I mean, but tomorrow is an okay answer, because that tells us that you want to move quickly. I want to be respectful of whatever the county's schedule is. So the tricky part is, and I've had this conversation with a lot of counties, just as an FYI, we sold the Otero County certificates yesterday. There's also a KUTAC Stiefel team. So we locked in their project yesterday for closing on the 27th. But, it all kind of comes down to that point. And, I think it'd be useful for us to know whether we're kind of going at full speed or we're kind of slowly dipping our toe in the water. Well, that's like a really bad set of mixed metaphors, but just
we probably need to sit down with Colleen again and also understand when some of our existing grants and other sources are, they all have their, rule out when actual money shows up. So I think to get you a good answer on that, we probably need to circle back with Colleen and sort of think about how much money we have up front. I think we have a fairly healthy general fund balance, so we feel comfortable that a lot of these initial, costs to the design team and initial site work we can sort of handle, with our existing funds. We don't need new revenue, but at some point that we won't. So I think we need to sit down with Colleen and understand pricing to know to answer your question well.
One of the things on your grant sources, just as a quick note, and it hasn't proven to be a problem in the past for other funding sources for these kinds of facilities, but make sure that the grant does not restrict your ability to encumber the property. By that, I mean, it's going to be subject to a lease transaction. In order to comply with state law, you know, the Board of County Commissioners has the ability to annually appropriate for that lease or walk away from the obligation altogether. Legally, obviously you won't do that, but legally you'd have that ability. And so it would be relet to a third party, but it would be encumbered in effect. That's the word we've been using. It's not a mortgage per se, but it's encumbered. So it could go theoretically to these other uses. You know, if the county walked away for the duration of the site lease, that site lease is going to run probably at least 10 years past the financing lease to provide, usually that's the standard security for the investor to know that if the local government did walk away and non-appropriate, there's a little bit more time to try and recoup some of the money by subletting to a third party. So at any rate, just you might want to just double check or make sure that anybody that's granting you funds does not have a problem with you using their funds. I mean, if they do, then you might want to deflect that funding to, you know, something that, you know, maybe it's not directly related to the brick and mortar of the facility.
Yeah, no, that's good to check, and also to say, I mean, we're already fine. Every grant has its own rules about, like, do they release up front? Do they release when the whole project is finished? You know, can you write the grant for a little part of the project?
Right.
So we're navigating that. Katie, it looked like you had wanted to chime in on something there.
Yeah, I guess two things. One, in the schedules I've seen, the COP issuance is penciled in for early 2023. I think that's at least what the design and DPM Colleen's team have kind of been imagining. There's been a lot of changes in the last couple of weeks, so I'm not sure how stable that is, but just to give you a ballpark of what those folks seem to have been thinking. In terms of the grant, I just want to flag for your awareness, because it may factor into the county's underwriting. It has been awarded, it's $3.575 million in a USDA community facilities grant. We are advocating that those funds be released early in the project rather than on a reimbursement basis following the full completion of the project. And we have, they're earmark funds, so there's some flexibility there, but it's just another contingency in a way, or it's just another element to the county's repayment of the COP. Worst case scenario, that comes through at, you know, in 2024, or even, you know, whenever occupancy is taken is when the funds would traditionally be released.
And I have had enough experience with the underfunded courts. You know, I think I've done 3 or 4 now with underfunded courts funding, and hasn't been an issue so far.
Yeah.
So they've been pretty
We're
easy.
about to apply for those funds, and we're going to be seeking, I think, 2.2 million. But all of that, I think the hope is that would comprise about 10 million or however much upfront to offset the, you know, to minimize the principal amount borrowed.
Absolutely. Maybe it would be helpful, just because we've talked about all these different parts, maybe it'd be helpful, and maybe Stacy can do this part, is to talk about, like, you know, the process and the steps and kind of what we go through that the county should expect. I mean, Tom and Ashley talked about a lot of the documents and you know, kind of continuously communicating, but you know, there are standard steps and timings related to all the aspects of the financing, and that might be helpful to kind of just talk about that.
Sure, I can jump in here. Generally, we say this process takes about 90 days or so, give or take. As Alan mentioned, we can always speed that up. We can always slow that down based on whatever the goals of the county are. I think if we know that you're targeting January, February or so, we probably would start sooner rather than later, just to give a little bit more time to the county so you're not rushing, so it doesn't take up 100% of your time as we go through this process, just to try and make it hopefully a little bit more not as stressful, because this is a big project, and we understand the stresses that are involved with that. And our goal, along with QTAC, is to try and make it as seamless as possible for you guys, and give you confidence in what you're doing going forward. So as Ashley and Tom mentioned, there is a lot of due diligence and document gathering just to get the first draft of that preliminary official statement put together. So we usually give that about 3 weeks to 4 weeks to get the due diligence questionnaire, all the documents submitted, and that first draft of the preliminary official statement out. From there, we usually schedule a working group call about a week after that first draft is released, get everyone on the call. Tom and Ashley will usually go through kind of what they did here, as well, high level overview of what all the documents out there are. Since you have them in front of you, it usually makes it a little bit more tangible. And then we go through that preliminary official statement. They'll go through the sections why they're relevant. And then we can provide comments, feedback, what we think investors might be looking for in certain sections, give comments, this information is not correct, or we can update this here. So that first call is usually an hour and a half or so. It's a little bit longer, but it's really to help get the ball rolling. And after that, that helps the next set of draft documents that come out. We usually take that second draft and send it to the rating agency. So there are 4 rating agencies, Fitch, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Kroll. Since the county does not issue very frequently, I was just looking on Emma, and I don't think I've seen any issuance from the county except for maybe a multifamily in a little over 20 years ago. We would recommend just one rating and likely from Standard & Poor's. We found they've just been a little bit more favorable. They do have an office in Centennial, Colorado, so they're just a little bit more familiar with the landscape of Colorado and how that works. We've used them quite often on COP transactions. So we would likely recommend just going with the one rating agency. And so for that process, Stiefel, we will take the preliminary official statement and we will put together a presentation with the assistance of the county, but we'll take the lead on that. So we'll put together a presentation that highlights the county, highlights what we know Standard & Poor's is going to care about as they look to give a rating of the county's COPs. So we'll schedule a call with them where we will ask the county to present the presentation that we put together. It usually is about 45 minutes. It's called a presentation, but it's more of a conversation with the rating agency analysts. And then after that, about 10 days after that presentation, they will release a report and a public rating of the county. So, usually it's in the A-ish category. That might change slightly based on what we decide is the leased property. But usually we anticipate a lot of counties are in that A category. We'll also take the documents and the rating and send that to the bond insurers to see if they will provide bond insurance on the credit. Once again, that will depend on the ultimate determination of the leased property. So with all of that, I kind of went through the rating process, but in the background of all of this, we are still working on finalizing that preliminary official statement, finalizing all of the legal documents that the county will approve, that parameters resolution. Once everything is finalized, we will post the preliminary official statement and begin marketing that to investors. And usually we like to put that out to investors 10 days to about a week, just to give them time to review the transaction, review the credit, ask questions if they have any. After that marketing period, we call it, we will price the COPs, and this is the day. Fun, I think it's fun. You see all the investors that participate, we do have an interactive, it's called IPREO order monitor, where you can watch the sale as it takes place. You can see what investors are participating in your sale. It's pretty interactive, and then we try and make it as transparent as possible. So we'll tell you why we're pricing these bonds or these certificates a certain way. We'll give you comps, so comparable transactions, so to hopefully make you feel comfortable with the process. And at that day, that is when the interest rates are officially locked. So from there going forward, you do know your price. You do know that what annual payments you will be paying over the course of the lease. And then we work on, but QTAC then does their magic, finalizes all the documents, and about 2 weeks after that is when the money is officially sent to the county. So I know that was kind of a lot, tried to keep it high level. We did do send like a illustrative schedule of events that kind of shows it there. So that one is about a 14-week process. Like I said, we can always speed that up or slow it down just based on whatever the county's specific target goals are.
Okay.
Alan, do you have anything to add?
No, and I think we can, this will become more obvious when stuff is actually going on. It's just in abstract, it's a little tricky. But I think Stacy's comment about if early 23 is the timing, I think we want to get moving. When you start working on financings at the end of the year, it tends to be difficult sometimes around the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays to get everyone together. So our goal would be to get stuff prepared, and then the county can tell us exactly when we kind of want to move forward so that we're ready. It's hard to speed up at a moment's notice sometimes. So I think, kind of being a little ahead of the curve would be helpful.
Yeah, I think one question I had, and this is super helpful to walk through the process, and I think one question or concern is, already it felt that the 45 million budget and financing 35 was hard. And now that we're over budget, I guess it sounds like really like sort of 2 months before we learn hard truths from the market about interest rate and all the pricing details. But I think to what extent can this team on the Zoom call advise us about whether we are overstretching? And
yeah, so I think there's two things I think we talked about a little bit at our last meeting.
I just, and to add to that, and I don't know that you can answer this question, but I think our next conversation is like showing you all of our assets for whatever creative leveraging of that bond insurance, et cetera, and the financing would probably roll into this, because I do think we actually have more assets than you had realized, Alan. Sorry.
yeah.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. I forgot about all the other stuff the county owned.
Well, maybe, sorry, just to say more clearly, it's like, the design team is looking for the green light to, move forward with, what will now be sort of a 42,000 square foot building. And, they're sort of like, understandably like, you good with this? So I know there's like a iterative dance here, but again, we, as much guidance as we can get, you're able to give on, how, again, like I said, whether we're overstretching on the finance.
Right. So I think that we'll do some analysis kind of initially based on the county budget and where you are. The rating process does give you some guidance because it does compare the county to other similar credits. But then the bottom line is really how comfortable you are with the payment of X dollars a year. I mean, it's going to be a percentage of your budget, and you kind of have to say, and we've had this conversation previously, it's like, how comfortable are you with that number? And we will continuously to update interest rates. So that's the other problem we have, is we can nail down the cost and then the interest rates can adjust. And we've seen a significant increase in interest rates over the last, 8 months. So that's another challenge. There are ways to deal with that a little bit in structure. But in the end, I wish I could control interest rates, but I don't have that power. But it's really, that's the question. I think it's going to be more of, and I think I talked about this in April, more of a question of, yeah, the county can borrow the money. I don't think that's the issue. It's do you feel comfortable doing it at that level?
Yeah.
But with all the variables you have, and I know I'm sounding like I'm
Politician.
selling here, but with all the variables that you have, at least if we get the financing locked in, you have something that you know what it is. It's at least it's something that's fixed, because we have a lot of moving parts right now, which is tricky. But we can move. We'll keep moving forward. We will keep updating the numbers. We'll do the initial analysis, and then the county has to get comfortable with what that number is. In the information we sent over to Tim, we did a kind of in that example, it was 35 million of borrowing with expenses, and kind of estimated what a payment would be at today's interest rates. But we can actually update that as many times and as many variations as you want. But there's obviously a point beyond which we can't go. I don't think we're there yet from our perspective, not from yours, but from our perspective.
Yeah.
Are you saying it'd be helpful, maybe if Steve will put together like a table comparing some different scenarios similar to what they sent him, but for, since we're talking about very likely borrowing more than 35 million,
Right.
would something like that be helpful?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think from I know you said it well. It's like at the end of the day, it's like our comfort with that long-term commitment against the county budget. So knowing what that number might be rising to, given the increased budget and interest rate changes, would be good.
What would be helpful from our end to provide you with like a complete list of assets, like land, properties, acreage, use?
No, I just think just a brief, one sentence description and a estimated value is kind of really all we need to start with. Yeah.
On the vacant land, I want to be mindful of the county's time in the value of going through all that. Given, Alan, that vacant land isn't essential the way.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about vacant land. I do the courthouse, any other buildings you own, airport.
Library, golf course.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a list going. Okay.
Yeah. It speaks to the likelihood of your default, and the county might, theoretically be more inclined to walk away from payments if it's just going to lose some old piece mining claim, which I know there are many, versus, an airport, which the county would like to keep.
Okay. So we can put together a schedule, like just assuming, borrowing money in February or sometime in the middle of, March or February, or just so you have a schedule with all the tasks laid out. We can work on a list of participants. We can work on some preliminary, some numbers, just so you have different scenarios when you give us kind of some update. But this is iterative. We just keep updating and updating till we get as close as we can. So you have that information.
Yeah,
That would be great, and I think the timeline is manageable. I'll probably regret saying that, but
yeah.
Well, one thing I heard from Colleen is that a lot of the kind of land-related environmental geotech documents might be, available already in a package manageable way, or something that can be transferred over to or available to the team. Design documents, Financial documents the county has, budgets, audits, things like that. That's pretty relatively easy. Things like that. I mean, a lot of the stuff you probably have already. And when QTAC sends over the disclosure questionnaire and the request for information, the advice that I like to offer is, send over the easy stuff first. Like, don't wait to get every document before you send stuff over, because some stuff's more important than others. But just the easy stuff, get it sent over to QTAC. Again, those documents that already exist, and then some of those other questions we can figure out later. So.
And the other thing, I was going to say, the other thing is if there's something that kind of answers a question, whether it was part of a study or something like that, that just has a narrative. I mean, don't worry, just send us the whole document and say, it's answered generally. Your question, I think, is responded to in these pages. I mean, so you don't have to fret about spending a lot of time, making it more reader friendly. We can pull information from whatever you've got. Because I mean, looking at the timeline that you've been working on this, the stuff that we pulled off that the task force, is posted up. You've already got a lot of stuff referenced. I know you've been working on this for a while, so I'm sure there's a lot of information. And having said that, I'm sure Ashley's frowning a little bit because she's got a little bit of reading that we'll all have to do as well. But I bet we're more than willing to do it.
Ashley, when will you send the questionnaire?
So we will get started on the questionnaire now. One of our paralegals is actually in Amsterdam, so I can't get a hold of her, but I'm willing to bet that we could get a questionnaire out even as early as the end of next week or the very beginning of the week after that. We take our time with the questionnaire because we want to make sure that if we give you that list up front, we don't have to keep coming back to you and asking for more and more and more. So we do put a lot of time into crafting that document before we send it to you. I will put it on, it's on my radar already. I'll reach out to our paralegal team. I know they were trying to decide who was going to take the lead on this particular transaction. So, and then once we get Christine back next week, we should be able to turn that fairly quickly for you. That was a very long way of saying either the end of next week or the beginning of the week after that.
That's great. I appreciate it. The background's helpful.
And I promise I'll never frown if you give me something to read. I enjoy reading, so.
Okay.
And I just wanted to share, Alan had given us some examples, I think Fremont and Chafee and Moffett of the documentation, and we shared those with Environmental Council even before closing on the property. So they had a chance to see what they might be expected to advise on, and they gave some preliminary comments. Nothing was super concerning to them. They actually were somewhat concerned that, they wanted to be thinking ahead in terms of how the environmental condition of the site could affect the bank trustee relationship in particular.
One last procedural question. The county did adopt, when the property was acquired, that reimbursement resolution in February, correct? It was at February or March timeframe. Did that ever get adopted?
I don't think so. That the one you sent to Chris Floyd, the county attorney, I don't think so. Because
one of the things the board may want to do, that you're able to do once we do close, let's assume first quarter of 23, you can reimburse yourself for some of these out-of-pocket expenditures. You can always reach back to soft costs that are of a study type, engineering, environmental. But the kind of things like, at this point, we wouldn't be able to reimburse ourselves for the cost of acquisition of that property. That has to be within 60 days of that expenditure.
But didn't pay much.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, to the extent that there's actual, we're starting to move dirt, we're doing, something that would be considered hard costs, you would want that reimbursement resolution in place. So I guess my thought would be maybe let's go ahead and adopt that. And then the board can make the decision when the financing is done, whether you'd want to reimburse yourself, but to be able to do that, you'd want that reimbursement resolution in place, before those expenditures are made. So
I can forward that to Tim and Jeff.
Yes, please.
Thanks.
And again, it doesn't require that you do that, but it creates a path that you could do that if you wanted to from those proceeds once you get them. Okay.
Did we accomplish what we tried to accomplish this morning?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that's a positive first step.
I have a stomach ache now, Alan.
Thank you. Well, that's part of my job. Um,
At least the lateral mine shafts are
Yeah.
not shallow.
Right.
You guys should see a picture of these. It's like veins and arteries running all through the site.
It is
Dropped spaghetti on it.
Amazing.
Blood bill.
amazing that could have been done, 160 years ago, just incredible. Well,
All right.
okay, we will, we have a few tasks. We're going to work on some initial documentation. We'll do some review, expect some information from the county, but I appreciate everyone's time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Sarah, Jeff, Tim, you guys good for right now?
Yeah.
I'm good.
Thank you all. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, nice to
thank
meet
you,
you all.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks now.
Guys,
Thanks,
have a great day.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.